All right. Good evening, everyone. If you can see me and hear me, it'd be great if you can send me a chat. Maybe you guys can introduce yourselves. We're going to give a couple minutes for anybody else who's kind of tailing on. We're going to give a couple minutes for anybody else who's tailing on. All right. Okay, looks like we've got several people showing up here. Okay, if any of you guys are having trouble hearing me, let me know. Awesome. Thank you, Debbie. Perfect. Yeah, I'm actually keeping I'm keeping my phone close by for our chat on here, since the chat is through YouTube, but technically I'm actually producing this through Google Hangouts. All right. Let's give 2 more minutes here, and then we'll get started. All right. Well, we're in the last minute here. Someone want to tell me what they had for dinner, what they're preparing for dinner tonight? No judgment, I promise. That sounds more like a snack, Mr. Reyes. Very nice, Debbie. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get my screen shared with you guys, and we'll get started here. Again, if you guys have any questions that come up, please use the chat. If it's something that I see quickly enough and can address while I'm going, I will. If not, I'll do my best to go back and attend to those. And again, if you guys have anything specific that you're going through now, if you want to throw it out there, that'd be fantastic. Okay. Everybody see my screen? Perfect. Well, thank you all for joining. This is the first webinar I've ever done. We plan on doing these on a regular basis, probably alternating between webinars and live seminars. A lot of that dependent on the type of topics that we're going with. And of course, we want to reach people however we can. We tend to work more face-to-face with people that are in our local network, but we can work with people all over the country with all the things that we're going to talk about. So definitely, if you have family members that are going through either things that we're talking about today, even if they live across the country, or other issues that we hit in our webinars, especially over the next few months and years, definitely don't hesitate to get them in on it. All right. Okay, so here we go. So what is irritable bowel syndrome? Irritable bowel syndrome is a chronic GI disorder, and it's characterized by a host of different digestive dysfunctions, mainly things like abdominal pain, like cramping, gas, bloating, indigestion. A lot of people have constipation or diarrhea, or a combination of the two. And what's really interesting about IBS is that the level of severity is huge from person to person. And what's really interesting about what we've seen with working with a lot of people is that people who have the same things going on inside their gut may see different symptoms on the surface. And that's part of why it's so important about the way that we look at things. We're not diagnosing any specific thing and healing one specific thing. And we'll go deeper into that as we go along. And one of the things about irritable bowel syndrome, I hear a lot of stories from people that we work with. And, for any of you that are going through it, that this is a major thing that, it's a daily battle. It changes your life. Everything from, if you're traveling, mapping out, okay, when are we going to stop? Am I going to have a bathroom close? With social engagements, wondering, is this somewhere that I can go with the issues that I've got going on? The anxiety that can come with that, and maybe to the point of even avoiding social gatherings. I've had a client tell me recently that every time they get ready to go on a long trip, he starts to get anxiety. He thinks part of that is what actually triggers his IBS. It's really, really interesting. And then we also start to see, with that, we oftentimes, because of those things, we start to see anxiety and depression clinically come about. Okay, so IBS is actually one of the weirdest things that most doctors are diagnosing. And what's funny is we don't tend to focus on the definition or the diagnosis of IBS, which is kind of funny that, of course, we titled this Combating IBS, but we don't really actually care all that much about the diagnosis. It gives us some clues as to what your symptoms are, but that part doesn't really make a difference. So, and here's what's interesting. So your doctors define IBS as a, quote, functional gastrointestinal disorder. Now, functional meaning your GI tract isn't functioning properly, right? You have all these symptoms related to it, but there's no apparent physical damage, meaning that if they do a biopsy, they don't see anything wrong in there. And that's a problem, right? This is how they're determining their treatment plan. And unfortunately, that's part of why, most medical professionals, most general doctors, their treatment plan is just to alleviate symptoms, right? It's take antacids or it's take a medication. In extreme cases, it's going straight for surgery. But even the surgery route, their IBS is defined as not actually finding anything wrong. So it's really, really tough. Now, one of the big differences about the way that we work and other functional medicine doctors and even naturopaths is we're actually looking for the why behind the disease. And we know that the body's systems are incredibly interconnected, right? We know that there are always multiple things going on. So when we're looking to deal with this, of course, we're going to look most closely in that area. We're going to look at the local tissue, but we know that there are a lot of things outside of there that can cause some of these things. And even if the tissue looks like it's intact, there are other things underneath there that we can't account for. Another thing that's really important here, and we'll talk about this again deeper once we get into some of these labs that I want to show you. But oftentimes issues like this issues like IBS tend to lead to other autoimmune issues. And the reason is, the symptoms of IBS or IBS itself, your body's sending you a signal telling you something's wrong, right? It's your immune system is overactive because something is wrong. And if it's overactive over a long period of time, your body starts to really struggle to adapt, and it leads to other things. And with what we know about the gut-brain axis, which I'll touch on that later and give you guys some other things that you can check out for that, what we're seeing is a lot of gut issues leading to neurological issues, things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS. Okay, so this is a big deal. Okay. Now, even more so, it's a big deal because a lot of people feel like it's normal. They feel like it's something that, it's just something I have to deal with. It's not that big a deal. IBS, even given the way it's diagnosed, it's actually considered one of the most underdiagnosed conditions in the U.S. for quite a few reasons. One being, like I said, people don't always go to their doctor, right? Sometimes people will just take some Tums and get over it. The other thing, and I'm sure there's probably a couple of you at least that have had this in the past, but a lot of times when people actually go to their doctor, they get written off as what most doctors would consider or call psychosomatic symptoms, meaning it's all in your head, and their feeling and their understanding is that if they don't see anything wrong, then there must not be anything wrong, which we know isn't true. That just means they're not looking in the right place. Some statistics show that irritable bowel syndrome, we've got about 38 to 96 million Americans suffering from IBS in their lifetime. Yet only about 5 to 7 people receive a proper diagnosis. So this is a big, big deal. So IBS, like I mentioned this a little bit, it's very difficult to diagnose. A lot of times it will become one of those catch-all diagnoses. A lot of doctors will do several different labs. They'll do everything from your regular blood work to actually sticking a video camera up there and looking for something. Some of them will look at even deeper measures similar to what we will look at and pathogen screens. But there's a big difference between what conventional medicine is running to look for these things and to treat these things than what functional medicine practitioners are looking at. It's actually my belief that a lot of the reason why most general practitioners aren't looking for this the same way is, one, because insurance companies oftentimes won't cover them, but also we have that interplaying factor with big pharma, right, with medications. And if there is no medication specifically to deal with that, then it's not a very valuable, business offering. Okay. So again, some of the diagnostic tests that'll be used: general medical history, physical exam, comprehensive blood test, stool analysis, breath bacterial tests. So I'm going to talk about a couple of these and what we do that's different and why we tend to find something that we can work on. Okay. Common causes, right? This is the first question that I always get. It's, what's the most common reason why someone gets irritable bowel, or why did I get this? Why did I get this? Where did it come from? And the true answer is actually that there's never one thing, right? There are several things that we see as trends, and we're going to go over quite a few of those. But the first thing that we need to be honest about is that it's never one thing. Never one thing. Our bodies are very, very adaptive, and given the opportunity, things like this start to happen, and I'd say for a lot of people, it happens over time. It's not one thing that happens, and then all of a sudden you have IBS. Now, one thing can be the last straw or the trigger, but we're going to go through quite a few things here. Here are really the top ones that we see. Poor diet is one, obviously. That's what a lot of people are going to look through first. What we love doing is seeing that someone has actually gone through the dietary part and tried some of the dietary stuff on their own, but figured out, what, there's more to it than that, right? And that's a huge reality. While diet can definitely help, and diet plays a big role in causing some of these things, rarely does it happen by its own. Pathogens are really what we consider the biggest thing, especially that's overlooked in dealing with IBS. Pathogens would be things like bacterial overgrowth, especially bad bacterial overgrowth, yeast overgrowth, things like candida, parasites. These are things that they don't go away by themselves. And I think that's one of the important things that we try to be upfront with people about as far as the dietary part. You can eat a very, very clean diet, but if a parasite or a bacterial issue such as H. pylori has already found its way and inhabited in your gut, then it's not going away on its own. Okay. Food intolerances are another big one. Now, from food intolerances, we see two sides, right? We see genetic dispositions, which generally end up as allergies, and those are things that people know from the very beginning. But we also see a lot of acquired food sensitivities or food tolerance issues. We're going to go into a couple of things that we can address with that. One of the things that I feel is very important for most people to understand, though, is that those acquired food sensitivities and food intolerances, those things that we didn't have problems with 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but started to become more of an issue as we got older, a lot of times those are happening because your immune system is at an alarm state, right? Your immune system is supposed to identify whether the food that you're consuming, whether it's beneficial to you or whether it's harmful. And when our immune system starts to go haywire because it's under attack from any number of things, right? All these things that we're talking about, that your body starts going into a state of ready, fire, aim instead of ready, aim, fire. Okay. Antibiotic use. Now, this is partly an interplaying factor. Antibiotic use by itself oftentimes doesn't cause IBS all the way. However, when we're using antibiotics, if we're not adamant and persistent about reestablishing the gut flora, then it's a really good environment and a really bad situation where bad bugs can come back in and take over. Okay. Another one here would be stress and psychological issues. I think this is one thing that can't be overlooked. Stress is stress, no matter how it comes, whether it comes internally or externally. So if you are in a season where you're working 60 hours a week and you're not sleeping enough, and you've got financial worries on top of that, and you've got relation issues on top of that, the way that you perceive and your body experiences stress determines your immune system's response to those things. So if we're under that load, that season for too long a period of time, everything starts to go, right? And ultimately, what we're talking about here is your immune system not functioning correctly, and that's what's causing these guys. Okay. So let's go deeper into some of these guys. Leaky gut is a term that's gotten quite a bit of pub over the last several years. And what's interesting about leaky gut is that, again, it's almost like a diagnosis for something that still doesn't tell us what's going on. Now, leaky gut, basically what it's telling us is that normal barrier in your GI tract is starting to open up and let things in that shouldn't be, right? So your digestive system should regulate pretty closely what gets in and what doesn't. Now, when you start eating foods that irritate your gut, then usually things like gluten is a very common one for people, that those junctions, or basically those walls, start to open up and allow other things to get in. Now, once bad guys start getting in, which bad guys can mean a number of things. They can mean pathogens, they can mean toxins, such as things like BPA. It could be gluten itself. It could be heavy metals. The problem about once those things get into our gut through that leaky gut opening that we've caused there is that your immune system starts going haywire. Your immune system all of a sudden has a floodgate of enemies flying in there, and it doesn't know what to do. And then on top of that, with specific things such as heavy metals and things like gluten, some of those things will go straight to our brain and can cross the blood-brain barrier. And this is when and why we start to see a lot of the neurological related issues in people. Okay, SIBO. This is another one that I think has gotten quite a bit more publicity in the last few years. Now, I'm actually going to touch back on a second. Leaky gut is one of the things we can test for. However, we're pretty careful about what we decide to test for. We want to respect our client's financial state, right? We don't want to run tests for things that aren't useful. Now, not knowing whether or not someone has leaky gut isn't really useful. However, it doesn't quite tell us why they have leaky gut. And this kind of overflows into SIBO as well. So SIBO is it's this acronym for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And basically what that is the bacteria in your gut are starting to creep up closer and closer towards your stomach, which we don't want. We start getting specific bacteria in the wrong places. And this is often fueled by a diet heavy in things like sugar and alcohol and other refined carbohydrates. And that's mostly because the strains of bacteria that SIBO feed off of, are those things. Things like antibiotics or acid blocking drugs and steroids can also disrupt your gut flora and really create a happy home for these types of bacterial overgrowth. So SIBO is one of those that actually a lot of general doctors will do a breath test for it, depending on how close to the functional side they are. And it's kind of helpful, like looking for leaky gut, but not quite as helpful, because while it tells us a category of bacteria that are present, it doesn't tell us the exact bacteria that are present. Okay? And so our thing is, if we can identify the specific bacteria that are going on there, then absolutely we want to, because that'll give us a more accurate way to address them. Okay. Yeast overgrowth. Again, probably one of the more well-known things, if you're one of those that has had gut issues for a long time and just scour the internet for anything you can relating to that. Yeast overgrowth is very similar to SIBO. It causes a lot of the same IBS type symptoms. And, one of the things that's interesting here, we're going to touch on in the next one, but SIBO and yeast issues, while they tend to cause the most notable surface level symptoms, right? Things like bloating, gas, constipation, diarrhea. They oftentimes aren't truly the root cause. A lot of times those things piggyback on other things that we see going on. Like I said, the most common form of yeast overgrowth is Candida. It's one of those that's actually naturally present in our mouths and our intestines to aid in digestion, nutrient absorption. But once they get in excess, we see major issues. Again, Candida feeds on sugar and alcohol more than anything else. Okay. Parasites. Okay. A scary word for a lot of people. Parasites are one of those things that people, when I talk to them about it, they tend to think that you have to travel to a third world country or eat really dirty water or undercooked food to be exposed to or have something like this. And while those are reasonable thoughts, right, that does happen, and probably more often that's, you know, when it can happen, we're actually exposed to these things on a daily basis. And really what it comes down to is the state that our body's in. So a lot of times I'm expressing to people that the reason why things like parasites will start to inhabit and create more of a defense system and be able to protect themselves, more of a home in you, is because we haven't been taking care of our body real well. Now, that's not always, I will say, something that we can avoid, right? We've all been through that season, like I said, where we're working, you know, 60 hours a week, or we're not sleeping, or we're not sleeping, and maybe we're not moving enough, or we're over exercising. And then of course the food part as well, right? So it's all dependent on the state that our immune system is in. There are certain parasites that are actually beneficial, but most of them do cause a lot of issues in this. And the really important thing with these guys is knowing what type you have. We actually also will see a lot of people who have gallbladder issues when they tend to have parasite issues as well. It's actually our opinion, and those of a lot of other functional medicine practitioners, that gallstones and issues where people are having to get their gallbladder taken out are oftentimes caused by a parasite infection, because these guys will actually, while they'll inhabit and start in our GI tract, they'll actually crawl up your bile duct and sit in that gallbladder so that they can inhabit there as well. So it's really an important part when we're assisting people through these things. Thanks, Dr. Chris. Okay. So the lab that we use as really a key cog in identifying some of these issues that we've talked about so far, parasites, bacterial overgrowth, things like Candida, and really overall gut health, is the GI map. Now, what's great about the GI map is that these guys use what's called quantitative PCR technology, and they identify over 40 different pathogens and GI health markers. Now, what's different about quantitative PCR technology versus what you'll normally see at your doctor? So this will look at, say, a lot of doctors will look at H. pylori, and that's a bacterial overgrowth, the most common bacterial overgrowth. We've actually seen some studies that suggest our chances of having H. pylori overgrowth at some point in our life is equal to our age. So if you're 45 years old, you're almost about a 1 in 2 chance there. Now, we can't overcome those things, right? But so most doctors, they will do, there's a couple different ways to look at them. Some will do an H. pylori breath test, which is more of an associated test, right? It's not looking exactly at it. Or they'll do a stool test. That's essentially what they're doing, is taking a microscope and looking as close as they can and hope that they find it. Now, the problem with a lot of these bacteria is that they will die very, very quickly. And same thing in the case of parasites as well, is that they will go through different stages of life. So unless you test that sample a lot of times, or different samples, I should say, recurring samples, over 3 or 4 consecutive months, you won't actually find it. Now, this quantitative PCR technology has 2 different things. One, it's looking at DNA presence. So they're able to identify something no matter what state it's in, which is really, really important. We've used some of these old testing methods in the past, and our rates of catching things were significantly lower. So we've seen the difference in our own practice. Now, the other part that's important is that it's quantitative. We know that there are normal levels specifically for things like H. pylori and a lot of these bacteria. So it's not just the presence of it, period. It's in what amounts. And that's really the key in looking at what's going on in your gut. It's all about balance. It's all about the balance between good and bad. So, you know, we can actually have, say, normal levels of all the bad bacteria and pathogens. But if we have a way low number of good bacteria, we can still see issues that way. And we do get, I think, 6 to 7 different measures of good bacteria in this map, in the GI map as well. Okay, another big issue. Again, guys, if you have questions that pop up about things that we're going through, you know, that GI map, a lot of times, a lot of people will have questions when it comes to things like parasites. Okay, so food intolerances, allergies, and sensitivities. I think this is often where most people start to look when it comes to IBS and other digestive issues, right? Our first thought is, okay, what did I just eat? And while that can be the main source of your IBS issues, oftentimes it's not, right? We mentioned that a lot of times these things are acquired as we go. So they can help in the healing process, but oftentimes it's not the root cause. Now, when we're talking about these things, food intolerances, allergies, and sensitivities, it's important to note that there are different levels. So allergies are immunoglobulin E. It's the most significant immune response your body can have to something like food, right? We don't generally test for allergies because most people know, right? You generally know if you have an allergy. You break out into hives, you go into anaphylactic shock, very, very significant things. Now, it's our opinion, actually, that looking into food sensitivities and intolerances are actually more important because they can be masked. Your immune system will create different immune responses through what are called immunoglobulin G, immunoglobulin A, IgG, and IgA. And some of those are delayed. Some of those are delayed by days. Some of those are delayed by weeks. So I think pretty much everybody, even if you don't have IBS, is used to the situation where you ate something and then 2 hours later you're thinking, oh, something's not right there, right? And while that can be something that just happened, it's actually just as likely that it's something from the day before or the day before that or the day before that. Okay, so testing for these things can be really important. Now, one of the routes that we generally go with our clients is that we only tend to test for them at the very beginning with the knowledge of our clients or letting them know that we expect or may want them to test again once we've spent several months working through the healing process, right? Because I said food intolerances and sensitivities a lot of times can be acquired. So if we go through a healing process, say for something like a candida or yeast issue, then a lot of the food sensitivities we found the first time around may completely change 3 or 4 months later. Okay. So some of you may be aware of elimination diet. A lot of times when we're working with people, if we can't go the testing route, the elimination diet is the best way to go. If you can't get help from someone, whether it's you can't afford it, you can't find the right person, whatever it is, starting on an elimination diet is probably one of the best routes you can go to more or less stop the bleeding if you think food is contributing to what's going on. So elimination diet, basically it's almost exactly what it sounds. You're eliminating a lot of foods. It can take weeks and months to go through this. And really what you're doing here is you're starting with a very small number of foods that tend to not cause issues in anybody. And then you as those immune system reactions that you've had die off and go away and your body flushes them out, you start reintroducing new foods. It's very difficult if you have a full-time job. It's very difficult if you have a family that you're trying to cook for. So it's not one of those things that we recommend people do, especially because it can take a long time as well. But I will say, if you have no other option, it is an option. Okay. So I mentioned this briefly a second ago. Immunoglobulin G is the most common tested measure in food sensitivity tests. It's the most abundant antibody in the human body. It's found in literally all of the body's fluids and works as a protection mechanism against bacterial and viral infections. A lot of the common food sensitivity tests out there that will look at this will be things like Cyrex and Genova. We've actually run the Cyrex quite a few times with people in the past. But we actually have a new lab that we've started using that looks at a little deeper. I would say actually another one I want to mention before we move on to this is the MRT is another one that a lot of people are familiar with. The MRT actually doesn't even look at immunoglobulins. It actually just looks at the size of the cell and basically if it expands or shrinks when it's exposed to foods. So immunoglobulin G is a response that unfortunately, while it can be helpful, a lot of times we'll get some false negatives. You can get quite a few false negatives because these general tests like Cyrex and Genova don't differentiate between good and bad, right? Because we actually do have good and bad. We have appropriate immunoglobulin G responses, and then we have hyperreactive responses. Okay, so the lab that we're using for food sensitivity tests is by a lab called ELISA Act Biotechnologies, and theirs is called a lymphocyte response assay. Now, if you see, let's see if I can use a pointer here. If you see right here how type 2 reactive antibodies are split into 3, those would be IgG, IgA, and IgM. So tests like Cyrex and Genova, they're food sensitivity tests, just test for foods that fit into this immune response. Okay, this one that we see right here would be food allergies. Okay, so then again, a pretty small piece of the pie. And this LRA, this lymphocyte response assay, looks at, oh, sorry about that, looks at all of these guys. Okay, so it's a big, big difference. And we're able to see how the body is responding, whether it's appropriate or inappropriate. Okay, because we actually do want our immune system to respond if something is a pathogen, if something is a toxin, if something is attacking us. It's just those hypersensitive responses to individual foods that we want to know. Okay, so let's go a little bit into our approach here. I want to talk about some of the things that we actually do once we get these results and how they can be helpful. Okay, so the functional approach to IBS and other digestive disorders, guys, this isn't something magical that we created. There are a ton of different functional health practitioners that function this way. And really the key, the first thing here that we have is identifying those internal stressors, right? And we've talked about some of those things like pathogens, things like food sensitivities. A couple of the things that we haven't touched on that while they do play a role, don't tend to be the first things we talk about and not something that we want to go at right away here today, would be things like nutrient deficiencies. So not having enough of, say, vitamin D, vitamin A, something like that, vitamin B. I would say the most common nutrient deficiencies that we see in people with IBS would be B vitamins and vitamin D. Vitamin D specifically because your immune system is generally being overworked. So you're needing actually a lot more. Your body's running through quite a bit of it. And then a lot of the B vitamins, you're actually producing, a lot of those are supposed to be produced by good bacteria in your gut. So if you have an imbalance there, which from what we found is more than likely with issues like IBS, you're generally not getting enough B vitamins. Toxins go in there as well, which that's kind of a catch-all word. That can be anything from heavy metals in your body, like having mercury fillings, that can be cosmetic products, that can be air, that can be water, all those things go into play. So our first thing is, of course, is we need to identify those internal stressors. And once we do that, we need to remove them, right? So if we find a pathogen, we need to remove them. If we have food sensitivities, we need to remove those foods from the body. Now we do that to improve the body's ability to heal. And this is really an important part about the way we work, guys. It's not that we're curing IBS by taking out these pathogens. All we're doing is we're aiding your body's natural response to heal. Your body will heal itself if it has the opportunity. Now, if inflammation caused by things like parasites or things like heavy metals or eating bad foods that are breaking down your gut are causing your immune system to constantly be overworked, it never gets the chance to actually go into that healing mode, right? So all we're trying to do is remove as many stressors as possible so your body can actually get into that healing mode. Okay, so once we've removed some of those, we want to replace. And replace means a number of things. It's introducing a proper diet, which we're specifically saying proper because there isn't necessarily one, which we'll talk about that in a second. But we're also replacing habits. We're replacing good bacteria in your gut. So we're replacing all these things that put that load on your body and introducing something that can actually continue to help it heal. And then kind of piggybacking on top of that, we want to go into repair or restore mode, right? So we want to include restorative movement. We want to make adjustments to your lifestyle. We want to add supplements that will help your body heal at a faster rate. And one of the things that we're pretty upfront about people with is that if your body has the opportunity, it actually won't necessarily need so much of that repair or restore, not necessarily need that repair or restore phase. It just may take longer for your body to do it on its own, right? Our goal is obviously to help people heal in a as quick a way as possible. We don't know how long that may take. Oftentimes we're looking at several months, but it's one of those things that we know people are uncomfortable, so we want to help them as much as they can. So the one thing that we have to be upfront with people about, however, is that we don't generally get like this in a month or a couple months, or oftentimes in a year. Oftentimes, guys, we're talking about several years of things going on here. Okay, so let's go into diet. Okay, this is the biggest question that I get of anything in the nutrition world is what is the best diet? And especially when we start getting into dietary or digestive issues, people want to know, okay, what diet should I be on? And the reality is, guys, we don't honestly know until we know what's going on inside. Okay, everything changes. There are some situations where we tell people they should be eating as much fermentable foods and probiotic foods, things like kombucha and sauerkraut, right off the bat. And then there are some situations where we can actually see the opposite of that, where we don't want, that's actually the worst thing we can do, and we can make someone worse that way. Okay, so I put a couple of the best options here. Autoimmune paleo. These are especially, guys, if you're not getting help from someone else, start looking up these diets and start trying them out along with things like the elimination diet. Okay, so autoimmune paleo or AIP is oftentimes the first place I will start with people, depending on what I see. If you're having autoimmune tendencies and digestive issues, this is definitely where you should start. Low FODMAPs is another one. Basically, FODMAPs cuts out fermentable fibers. If you guys really want to look into it, FODMAPs can be very difficult. But basically, it's an acronym for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. So you're basically cutting out fibers, lots of sugars, and sugar alcohols even. Okay. Gluten-free, while it has become a fad, can be very helpful for people. While oftentimes it's not the only thing going on, we have a lot of people that get better just by following gluten-free diet. Now, the nice thing about a lot of these other ones like AIP and FODMAPs and SCD, they generally follow gluten-free as well. So you can kind of cover multiple bases there. Okay. SCD, or specific carbohydrate diet, is one that's often used specifically for issues with SIBO. It's very similar to FODMAPs. I'm not going to go into depth on these, mostly because we want to get into some other things here. But again, like I said, if you're not working with a practitioner, if financially you can't do that right now, or you haven't found the right person, whatever it is, these are a great place to start to at least get some relief, hopefully. Okay, and we're going to talk about a lot of other options for that as well. Okay. Prebiotics and probiotics. Okay. Prebiotics, I'm actually going to start with that. These are ones, while they can be very important for people, they can actually hurt at the same time. So prebiotics are actually food for probiotics, right? So a lot of the things that we eat with fiber, things that are in like artichokes and garlic and onions, asparagus, apples, legumes. All of those are high in prebiotics. Now, these are things that you will not see on the FODMAPs diet, right? Because and oftentimes with things like SCD, because we're trying to limit food for bacteria because we've got the wrong mix of bacteria. So that's one that is one to be careful about, because I think generally when we see prebiotic and probiotic, they tend to sound like the same thing and they both sound like they're good for you, when in fact prebiotics can cause more issues if you haven't dealt with some of the underlying issues, depending on what they are. Okay. Probiotics, on the other hand, generally do not cause any problems or can't make anything worse in people with IBS. I will say I could be proven wrong by some probiotics, but I haven't found any that tend to make you worse. Now you'll see here on the bottom left, Megaspore is a probiotic that we use often. We actually use two probiotics the most, and they're very similar. Megaspore is one of them. It's a fantastic product that is different from most probiotics in that they call it spore-based. And what that means, it was essentially grown from soil instead of grown from a lab, and it's delivered much more effectively. So oftentimes you'll see in a lot of probiotics, needing 50 billion, 60 billion, 70 billion of specific strains. These guys are generally in the range of 1 to 4 billion. Okay, so you're cutting down the amount you're getting and not wasting as much. And the great thing about these guys, and the same thing with the other one that we oftentimes we use called Proflora 4R, those guys will actually, those specific strains are really huge immune system modulators. So they're going to help your immune system adjust to what it's going through. They will fight back things like yeast issues, things like candida, and they actually produce a lot of antioxidants and B vitamins and vitamin K2 in your gut for you. So even if you are not eating enough of those things, or if you are eating enough of those things and you're not digesting them very well, and which means you won't absorb them very well, you're able to get them through these bacteria, which is really, really cool. Saccharomyces boulardii here is a strain that we'll tend to use at the end of specific protocols working with bacteria. Saccharomyces boulardii has an uncanny ability to force bad bacteria out, which is really great. This company, actually, Microbiome Labs, makes a combo product of Saccharomyces boulardii and some of the strains from Megaspore. So a lot of times we'll use that as well. I put a picture of kombucha here as well. That's a probiotic food. Again, this is one that we're careful about. This is one that we definitely want to test before we see that. And it's funny because I will see online all the time people recommending that that someone else with digestive issues, hey, you should drink kombucha. It's really good for gut health. And while it can be, it's one of those things that can actually make people worse. I've seen several stories of that, and I cringe when I hear that because it can be dangerous. So I would say if you are having IBS type issues and you haven't looked at what's going on underneath, pay specific attention to how your body feels after drinking something like kombucha. Okay, it may be a really big sign for a yeast infection. Okay, digestive enzymes. Now, digestive enzymes are designed to be an aid, right? They don't generally heal anything on their own, but man, can they be a lifesaver. So digestive enzymes are things that your body should naturally producing. And your body produces them so that it can break your food down. And it's important to break your food down because your gut should be regulating what's going in and what's not. If they're not broken down enough, they'll either come through in a bigger form and your body may recognize it as a toxin, or it won't fit in and it'll just go straight through the system. And if we don't break it down, we don't absorb it. Okay. With digestive enzymes here, oftentimes at the beginning of working with something, we're just doing that for relief. A lot of people will see relief with this product that we have up here. This is actually a Young Living blend of essential oil called DIGESTIVE. This is a fantastic product. In fact, this is one of those that my family takes whenever we travel, whenever we go on vacation, whenever we know we're going to be eating something that we don't normally eat. And it is a lifesaver. There are a lot of other good digestive enzymes out there. We've tried quite a few, and this is the one that we tend to see as the most beneficial. Now, one thing that we'll see, not all the time, but fairly regularly, is after we've worked with someone, if it's only been a couple months, there may be the need for digestive aids as they go along. It still might be one of those part of the restore process, because while we may have gotten rid of, taken out, removed the things that we needed to, we may not be fully to that healed point where your body can sustain it on its own. And there are cases where people may need to take digestive enzymes for the rest of their life, depending on how much damage has been done. So this is one of those that I actually recommend anybody, even if they don't have digestive symptoms, have something like that around, because things come up. Okay. Further supplementation. Now, these are things that are general, right? Again, not everybody, and I actually should clarify again on all of these guys, don't just go out and use these guys. At the very least, guys, send us an email, send us a text, or give us a phone call, and give us something about your situation, and we can tell you what we would recommend, at the very least, what to start with. But these are guys that are oftentimes needing to accompany everything else that we're doing. And these are more relief care, or in just giving your body an extra boost, not directly going after some of these things. That Mega IgG 2000, this is actually a new product by Microbiome Labs, and it's replacing what a lot of people have recommended and done for a while to heal their gut in colostrum. So what essentially this is colostrum that's put in encapsulated form, and it's about 4 times the concentration level of IgG, or immunoglobulins. Now, this is important because basically what this is doing, right? We've talked about this a little bit ago about removing bacteria and removing toxins is what IgG does. A lot of people, their immune system is so bogged down by fighting for so long that it's not producing enough to help clear those things out. So by taking this in a supplement form like this, your gut can get a lot of support. Your immune system can get a lot of support. Okay, this one up here, liposomal B complex. This is a product that we get from Quicksilver Labs. The most important thing about this, and the next one I'm going to tell you guys about, is that it's a liposomal form, which liposomal forms are fantastic because they can bypass your gut's natural absorption system and get absorbed much more effectively, right? So it doesn't actually have to go straight through your gut, which we can reasonably assume isn't functioning well. So you're actually going to absorb a much higher percentage of it. And that's one of the big problems that we worry about with people with digestive issues, is if we're giving supplements and your body isn't breaking them down as much as we want or absorbing them as much as we want, you may not be getting the full benefit, okay? And like I said earlier, B complex or all your B vitamins become very important. They are cofactors for almost every process in your body. So a lot of other processes can't happen without them. And if you don't have the right mix of bacteria, then they're not going to be produced in enough amounts. Okay. Glutathione here, again, this is by Quicksilver Labs. It's the one we use. It is what a lot of people are called, quote, the master antioxidant. It will create or turn into literally any antioxidant your body needs. So it's really the top of the food chain, and your body will make what it needs for that. It's also really important for liver detoxification. So a lot of times when we have issues where people are going through toxic load, right, if their liver isn't functioning well either, then they're going to struggle to continue to get these things out of their body. So a lot of times we'll throw in some glutathione there. And like I just mentioned, detoxification is huge when it comes to dealing with these issues, because if your detoxification system isn't functioning well, you're not going to be able to get these things out of your body. And your body will use a number of mediums, everything from your hair and your skin, as well as your stools and your urine, to get rid of these things. But if your liver isn't processing them appropriately, then this can become very difficult. So one of the things that we're really aware of in helping people with detoxification is, one, removing the loads, right? So paying attention to air pollution. So that would be, checking the filters in your AC unit at home, possibly even your work. Especially a lot of people, that's not something that's generally looked at or taken care of. So bringing that up would be important. Water contamination is a big one, especially in California, which most of you guys are from. We don't tend to have very good water. So having a purified source in some manner is going to be better than nothing. There are details that probably should at some point we should go over as far as what type of water somebody should be drinking, but we'll save that one for another time. Pesticides in food, if you're not doing organic as much as possible, it's really something you should consider. Generally what I'll tell people, at least go organic in things that you're eating the outside of when it comes to produce. If you can't go organic all the way, that's a start. And those tend to be the biggest things that you can attend to. Okay. Other important things for detoxification could be things like exercise, anything that makes you sweat, anything that makes your pores open up. We also recommend, there's a business that's only a few doors down from us named Corey Cryotherapy, and they have a Sunlighten brand infrared sauna, which is a fantastic method for helping your body essentially sweat out toxins. It is different from a steam sauna because it's infrared. You're actually heating your body from the inside out, which is really important when it comes to detoxification. Okay, and then last but not least, guys, stress. Like I said, stress means a number of things, but focusing on things that you can do to manage your stress levels is really, really important for this whole process, because your perception, right, your brain's idea of the state that it's in is real, and that's one of the things that we will say a lot to people is perception is reality, especially when it comes to stress. Meaning, if you believe you're stressed, you're stressed. If you don't, then you're not, right? And your body will respond that way. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily you just talk the talk and hope that it happens. There are a lot of things we should be doing to account for those things. Some examples would be things like deep breathing and meditation. Certain forms of exercise such as yoga, tai chi, qigong are very important. Things like massage, journaling is a great one. And really even just spending time with people you care about, people you love, and getting outdoors. Getting outdoors, there's actually a lot of fantastic research that they'll do in Europe called forest therapy. Right? Literally getting outside just sets our body and resets our body in a way that we can't explain a lot of times. And a lot of this is related to the air quality. A lot of this is related to where the sun's at and being able to regulate our circadian rhythms. So if you're not actively, intentionally doing something to manage your stress levels, that can be a trigger on its own. Okay. So I'm going to take a look here. I think I saw a question here. Yes. So Karina said, white rice really triggers IBS. Yeah. We've seen that one a lot. And of course, this is a guess, right? This is, of course, not at all a diagnosis, but oftentimes when someone has issues with white rice, especially because it is such a plain, bland, easy to digest food, a lot of times that tells us something along the lines of either SIBO or Candida. It's funny because, generally we think of like the easiest foods that we can put on our stomach would be white rice, but we've had several cases where people come in and white rice is one of their triggers. And that's oftentimes why, because it is fermentable and it's generally higher in carbohydrate and sugar. So specific bugs love it and will eat more of it. Okay. So I've touched quite a bit on what we do, how we do it, and helping people overcome some of these issues. I hope that everybody who's really going through something got some information that they can use on their own, something that's actionable, something that they can take away from this. But on top of that, of course, we want to offer our services to you guys. We want to help whenever we can. So if you're interested in partnering with us to improve your health, for everybody that is still here and is still seeing this, we're going to offer 5 free consultations. So the first 5 people to contact us and schedule, we will make sure that that initial consultation is free. For those of you who are already clients of ours, if you just mention the coupon code so I know you are here, coupon code IBS, we'll take 20% off your next supplement purchase. Okay. Here's contact information. So if you don't have that from us already, you can reach me by email at eric@progressivehealthpro.com. My cell phone number, 417-343-9654. You can call or text. If you're not sure yet, if you have more questions, absolutely go to our website, check it out, fill out a contact form. And we'd love to just, even if this isn't something where I know I can't afford it or you don't think you can afford it, please just call us, contact us. We're willing to help in whatever way we can. Okay. So thank you again, everybody, for coming. I'll have some resources here. So if you guys want to, or actually, if you guys want sources for a lot of things that we talked about, I'd be more than happy to send them to you. A lot of these are from National Institutes of Health for statistics and things like that. So let us know if you guys have need any help there. And thank you again. Happy healing. We hope that you got something out of this. I'm going to hang out on here for a little bit. I'll put our contact information back up. So if anybody has questions, feel free to fire away right now. Again, thank you guys for coming. Thank you for participating. Okay. Oh, and you'll see this, you guys that are subscribed to us, whether it's on social media or through email. Our next seminar is going to be in person. I believe it's on the 12th. Let me come back. On the 11th. It will be on food sensitivities and food allergies specifically. So we'll go much deeper into the different types of food sensitivity panels that can be run, what the difference is. We'll go into the cost of those, why we choose the ones we do, and kind of where we're at and the whole scheme of things. Okay? Because we know that's a hot topic. All right. Okay, guys. Looks like we got a few people contacting privately, so absolutely we'll get in touch with you there. I'm going to go ahead and log this off. Again, thank you guys for coming out.